I finally got my son a $2,000 guitar after months of saving. My brother's twins smashed it to pieces while my parents recorded and laughed. My son broke down as my sister said, "This is real life for him now." I remained silent, and what I did next made every jaw drop. I'm Jackson, 34, and I live by one rule. If I ever make a promise to my boy, I'll bend the whole world to keep it. That belief carried me through 3 long months of double shifts, skipped lunches, and dragging myself home each night reeking of burnt coffee from the repair shop. But it all paid off last Saturday when I finally walked in the door with a hard case holding the acoustic guitar my 12-year-old, Caleb, had been begging for all year. And it wasn't just some random guitar. It was a $2,000 Taylor, the kind of thing you save up for, the kind of gift a kid remembers forever. The look on Caleb's face when I opened that case made every tired night worth it. He just froze, hands stiff at his sides, like he was scared it might vanish if he touched it. Then he strummed one chord and looked at me as if I'd just handed him a set of superpowers. That whole first evening we sat in the living room together, him plucking through simple riffs he'd picked up online, his fingers clumsy, but his smile so wide it almost hurt to see. He was so proud he asked if we could take the guitar over to his grandparents the next day so they could hear him play. I hesitated, because my side of the family is complicated. My folks have this way of brushing off anything I do, and my older brother, Mark, has somehow turned being a father into his whole identity. He and his wife treat their 9-year-old twins like royalty, and if you so much as step into the spotlight by accident, they'll make you pay for it. Still, I thought maybe letting Caleb show off his progress might get him a little praise, and honestly, he was so excited I couldn't say no. On Sunday afternoon, we loaded the guitar into the car like it was made of glass. Caleb kept running his fingers over the case the whole drive, whispering about the song he planned to play. When we pulled up to my parents' house, the usual circus was in full swing. Mark's twins were racing around the backyard with plastic bats. My dad was recording them on his phone, and my mom was hollering from the porch about not smacking each other in the face. "Hey, everybody," I called as we came in. "Caleb's got something he wants to show you." Mark glanced up from his lawn chair and smirked. "What is it this time? Another science project?" "It's his guitar," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "He's been learning and wanted to play for you all." My dad barely looked our way before turning his camera back on the twins, and my mom sighed like I'd just suggested we sit down and read the dictionary out loud. "Well, go on then, set it up," she muttered. We went inside where it was quieter so Caleb could tune up. As soon as he started playing, the atmosphere shifted. My parents sat stiff and quiet. Mark leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, and even the twins paused their chaos to listen for a moment. Caleb's notes weren't perfect, but the effort, the practice, every bit of it came through. When he finished, I waited, hoping someone might say something kind. "Cute," my mom said at last, her voice flat. "But don't get him too worked up, Jackson. Kids give up on hobbies all the time. You'll regret wasting that kind of money when he drops it next month." I saw Caleb's smile slip, but before I could jump in, Mark piped up. $2,000 for a guitar? You've lost it. You know Walmart sells them for $80, right? "It's not the same," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "This is a real instrument. Something built to last him years." Mark snorted. "Yeah, if my twins don't get their hands on it first." I didn't like his tone. He had that grin, the one that meant he was about to pull something just to get under my skin. I picked up the case and set it back beside the couch, partly to protect it, partly because I suddenly didn't trust leaving it out. The rest of the afternoon stayed tense. Every time Caleb tried to bring up the guitar, my mom shifted the subject, and Mark cracked jokes about me trying to raise a rock star. Even the twins seemed to catch on to the strange mood. They kept sneaking glances at the guitar case like it was some forbidden prize they weren't supposed to touch. By the time we were ready to leave, I felt drained, worn down from the whole day. But Caleb still had that fire in his eyes. He begged to play one more song outside before we headed home. I hesitated, then finally gave in. We stepped onto the patio, Caleb holding the guitar like it was made of porcelain, and that's when things took a turn. It was the first real sign the day was about to unravel. One of Mark's twins grabbed a plastic bat, swung it through the air, and stopped just inches from the body of the guitar. Caleb froze in place. My chest tightened, and my stomach dropped. "Knock it off," I snapped, but Mark just laughed from the porch. "Relax, Jackson. They're only playing." Something in his tone told me this wasn't over. And I was right. What happened next still makes the hairs on my neck stand straight up. I wish I could say I blew the bad incident out of proportion, that it was just kids fooling around, but it wasn't. That one swing was the match on the powder keg. I could feel the whole air shift, like it was charged with static. Caleb's knuckles went white around the guitar's neck, and he looked up at me with wide, nervous eyes, silently asking if he should pack it away. I almost told him yes. I almost told him we were leaving right then. But deep down, I hated the thought of letting Mark and his crew think they could rattle us into backing down. "Go on, bud," I said softly. "Play your song." Caleb gave a little nod and started strumming, the sound floating across the patio, clear and steady. But he didn't even make it through the first verse before the twins started shrieking over him. Not talking, full-on screaming, like they wanted to drown him out. Then one of them chucked a wiffle ball at his feet, making him stumble backward. "Hey!" I barked, my patience fraying fast. Mark, still lounging on the porch steps with a beer in hand, barely turned his head. "They're just playing, man. Chill." "They're throwing things at him while he's holding an instrument I paid $2,000 for." I shot back. "This isn't a toy. Can you get them to stop?" Mark smirked. "They're kids, Jackson. Lighten up. If it's that fragile, maybe you shouldn't bring it here." That hit harder than I'd admit. He knew how much I'd sacrificed for that guitar. I'd even told him about the endless overtime shifts when we grabbed lunch a few weeks back. He'd rolled his eyes then too, saying he'd never waste money on some hobby a kid would probably drop in a month. Caleb's song sputtered out. He stood there, quiet and small, like he wished he could disappear, and that broke me. He's not the type to crave the spotlight, so for him to build up the courage to play in front of family only to get shouted down and mocked, it felt cruel. "Come on, let's pack it up," I said finally. But Caleb didn't move. "Dad," he whispered, "can I just finish it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, go on." He tried again, but before he could get halfway through, my mom's voice came from the kitchen window. "Jackson, don't let him hog all the attention. The twins want to do their skit." Their skit. The same routine they force on us at every family gathering. Some mashup of TikTok dances and half-remembered movie quotes that everyone has to clap for like it's Broadway. "He's almost done," I called back. "Well, hurry it up," she said, like we were inconveniencing the whole world by existing. Caleb's shoulders sagged. I could see him wrestling with whether to keep going or just stop. He sped through the last chords, faster than usual, then gently set the guitar back in its case. I crouched next to him. "Hey, you were great," I whispered. He didn't answer, just nodded and sank down on the patio steps while Mark rounded everyone up for the twins' big show. Their skit dragged on for 10 minutes, with Mark filming every second, cheering like a maniac, and tossing me smug glances as if daring me to speak up. When it ended, my parents clapped and hooted like they'd just watched an Oscar performance. "See, Jackson," my dad said, "this is the kind of thing we love, kids having fun together." I swallowed the sarcastic reply on my tongue. Fun together. Right. We were getting ready to head out when my mom suddenly said, "Oh, leave the guitar here. The twins might like to try it." My head whipped around. "Absolutely not." She frowned. "Why not? Sharing teaches kids generosity." "It's not a toy," I said firmly. "And Caleb's still learning to care for it. He just got it yesterday." Mark chuckled under his breath. "Relax, man. They won't break it. Let them hold it for a minute." Not happening. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Instead, my mom muttered that I was being dramatic, and Mark smirked like he'd just found a new button to push. We left not long after, but the tension didn't leave with us. All through the next week, I got 3 separate texts from Mark, each one some dumb meme about overprotective dads. One had a kid wrapped head to toe in bubble wrap holding a guitar. Another showed a smashed guitar with the caption, "Relax, it's just wood." I ignored them, figuring he'd get bored eventually. But by the next weekend, he was still at it. This time, he actually called me while I was elbow deep in a carburetor. "Hey," he said, "we're having everyone over Sunday. Bring Caleb and his precious baby guitar. Maybe we can finally teach him how to loosen up." There was something in his tone that told me it wasn't just a joke. It sounded like a dare, like he wanted me to show up so he could push things further. After a pause, I said, "Yeah, we'll be there." I wasn't about to let him think he'd run us off. Caleb lit up when I told him, but when he packed the guitar that morning, he was quieter than usual. I asked if he was nervous, and he just shrugged. When we got to my parents' house, the whole vibe was off right from the start. My folks were already in lawn chairs, and Mark had that grin plastered on his face, the one that always made my gut tighten. His twins were over by the shed again, plastic bats in hand, whispering and giggling like they were in on some secret. "Look who finally showed," Mark said as we walked up. "Ready for a real concert?" I didn't answer. I just carried the case inside and had Caleb tune up in the kitchen. When he stepped back out to play, the twins were already out on the grass, swinging those bats like they were warming up for the big leagues. My dad even pointed his phone at them, chuckling. "Look at these two. Future sluggers." Caleb glanced at me, hesitation all over his face. "It's okay," I told him, even though every instinct screamed it wasn't. He started strumming anyway. The twins edged closer, step by step. Mark didn't call them off. My mom didn't either. Then, right as Caleb hit the chorus, one of the boys swung, this time not at the air, but straight into the guitar. The sound it made, the hollow, gut-wrenching crack, echoed through the yard. My whole body froze. Caleb gasped, stumbling back, clinging to the neck of the guitar, but the damage was already there, a long, ugly dent in the wood. My parents burst out laughing. Mark doubled over, clutching his stomach. "Oh man," he wheezed. "You should have seen your face." I felt something inside me snap. Then my sister strolled out onto the patio, looked at the guitar, and smirked. "Guess he's learning about real life now." I turned to Caleb. His eyes were brimming with tears, and I felt something icy settle deep in my chest. I crouched down, carefully took the guitar from his hands, and ran my palm over the dent. It wasn't just a scratch. It had cracked the finish, left a deep gouge. I knew right away it was going to cost a lot to fix, and even then, it would never look the same. "All right," I said quietly, standing up. My voice was calm. Too calm. "We're done here." I turned to leave, but Mark stepped in front of me, grinning like it was still some kind of game. "Whoa, don't be such a buzzkill. It's just a guitar." "It's not just a guitar," I shot back, my words sharp as glass. "It's Caleb's guitar, and you just stood there while your kids used it like batting practice." He shrugged. "Accidents happen. That wasn't an accident." His grin widened. "What? You think I told him to hit it? Maybe if you didn't baby him so much, he'd toughen up." I just stared, trying to process the garbage coming out of his mouth. Then my mom chimed in from her chair. "Jackson, you're overreacting. It's a good lesson for him. The world doesn't bend over backwards for your kid." Caleb's lip trembled, and he looked at me, waiting, begging, for me to defend him. And that was the moment it all hit me, heavy and hard, like the weight of the whole day crashing down at once. This wasn't about a guitar anymore. This was about respect, or the lack of it. It was about the way my family had been treating me and my boy for years, like we didn't matter, like we were the punchline to some inside joke. "I'm taking him home," I said, pushing past Mark. But then he dropped a line that stopped me cold. "Fine, take your kid, but the guitar stays." I froze. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," he shot back, stepping closer with that smug grin glued to his face. "You brought it here. The twins want to play with it. Leave it." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because the words coming out of his mouth were so ridiculous. "You've lost your mind if you think I'm leaving it here after what just happened. You're not taking it anywhere," Mark said, his grin slipping into something harder. He reached out and grabbed the case. "You think you're better than everyone. Buying your kid some fancy guitar like you're a hero. Maybe it's time you learned how to share." I yanked the case closer. "Let go." "Or what?" he taunted. "You gonna hit me?" That's when I saw it. My dad's phone. He wasn't filming the twins anymore. He had the camera pointed right at us. Recording. And in a sick flash, I realized he'd been filming everything. Caleb crying, the bat slamming into the guitar, Mark baiting me. "You're recording this?" I asked, my voice low and tight. My dad didn't even blink. "Of course. This is good stuff. Might send it in to America's Funniest Home Videos. Get a laugh out of it." That hit me harder than anything Mark had said. My own father, watching his grandson's heartbreak, thought it was comedy. "You think this is funny?" I asked, but he just shrugged. "You're the one turning it dramatic." Caleb's pale face tilted up toward me. "Dad, can we please just go?" My grip on the case tightened until my knuckles burned. "We're leaving," I said again. But Mark wasn't finished. "Not until you apologize," he said, stepping right into my space. "Apologize?" I repeated, stunned. "For overreacting." he said with that same damn smirk. For storming around like you're some big shot. You scared the kids. I glanced over at the twins. Scared? They weren't scared. They were laughing, whispering, eating up every second of this like it was the best show of their summer. No, I said flatly. Mark raised his brows. No. I turned to Caleb. Get in the car. He hesitated only a second before bolting toward the driveway. Mark moved like he was about to block me again, but this time I didn't even pause. I pushed past him, shoved open the gate, and headed for the car. That should have been the end of it. But as I was setting the guitar into the trunk, I heard Mark's voice rise behind me, loud enough for the whole yard. You know what? Maybe we should just keep it until you pay us back for the damage. I froze. Excuse me. You heard me, he said. Your kid dented it himself. My twins shouldn't take the blame. So either leave it here, or I'll make sure Mom and Dad don't invite you back until you pay up. I stared at him, stunned. He was really trying to flip the blame on Caleb. That's not how this works, I said slowly. Sure it is, Mark replied with a smirk. You always think you're right. But this is our house, our rules. You want to come here, you follow them. Otherwise, don't come back. I turned to my parents, waiting for someone to finally speak up, to tell him he'd gone too far. But they just sat there, silent. My mom even gave the slightest nod, like she agreed with him. That was the breaking point. All the years of being dismissed, all the times they'd favored Mark, all the digs aimed at Caleb, it all hit me like a wave. Fine, I said at last, my voice cold as steel. We're gone. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. But in the rearview mirror, I caught sight of Mark lifting his phone again, filming us as he laughed like this was the punchline to the greatest joke of his life. That image seared itself into my mind. And in that moment, I didn't just feel hurt anymore. I felt betrayed by my brother, by my parents, by my whole damn family. They had shown me exactly where we stood, and for the first time, I believed them. That night, Caleb didn't come out of his room for hours. When he finally did, he looked at me and asked if he'd done something wrong. I knelt down, looked him straight in the eye, and told him no, he'd done everything right. They were the ones who were wrong. But inside, my mind was already turning, already planning, because this wasn't over. Not even close. The very next morning, a message from Mark nearly made my blood boil. It was the video, the one my dad had filmed, posted online with the caption, * when your brother thinks his kid is a rock star. * the comments were packed with laughing emojis. That was the moment I decided I was finished playing nice. I didn't sleep that night, at least not really. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying it all in my head like some movie I couldn't shut off. The crack of the bat hitting the guitar, Mark's smug grin, my parents howling with laughter, my sister's smirk, over and over until the heat of my anger cooled into something heavier, colder. The video is what truly broke me. I forced myself to watch it once. Just once. Because I needed to know what Caleb had seen. It was 30 seconds long, just enough to catch the bat smashing into the guitar, Caleb gasping, me stepping forward, and then my dad's wheezing laugh in the background. Mark had even added a dumb cartoon bonk sound effect and slowed the clip down like it was some comedy sketch. Caleb's face was right there on screen, his wide, wet eyes, his lip trembling, and my family thought that was hilarious enough to broadcast. I felt sick. I wanted to hurl my phone across the room. Instead, I just sat scrolling through the comments. Strangers piling on, cracking jokes about spoiled kids and expensive toys. Bet the dad cried more than the kid. The worst part? They weren't wrong. I did feel like crying, not for the guitar, but for what this meant for Caleb. The next morning, when I checked on him, he was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at the wall. The guitar case sat unopened beside him. Want to play a little before school? I asked gently. He shook his head. You sure? It might make you feel better. He didn't even look at me. What's the point? They'll just laugh again. That crushed me worse than anything Mark had said. Caleb had never been loud or outgoing, but he'd always carried this spark, a quiet confidence when he was doing something he loved. And now, because of one ugly afternoon and one stupid video, that spark was gone. The next few days crawled by. My phone kept lighting up with notifications. Mark had tagged me in the video, like he wanted to rub my nose in every laugh, every joke. My parents didn't reach out once. Not to check on Caleb. Not to apologize. Not even to pretend to care. My sister sent a single text. * you really embarrassed yourself. Maybe try being less sensitive next time. Asterisk, I didn't bother replying. At work, I was a ghost. I went through the motions, fixing carburetors, changing oil, but my head wasn't there. Every time I looked at my hands, I saw them gripping that cracked case. Every laugh in the shop sounded like my parents and Mark, overlapping, mocking. The guilt ate at me the worst. I kept asking myself if I'd made a mistake taking Caleb over there. I knew how they were. I knew how they treated me. And still I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That they'd see his effort, his talent, and support him. One night, Caleb wandered into the kitchen and sat at the table. "Dad," he said softly. "Yeah. Can we sell the guitar?" I stared at him, stunned. "Why would we do that?" "Because I don't want it anymore," he whispered. "Every time I look at it, I think about what happened. I think about them laughing." My throat tightened. "Caleb, this guitar is yours. You earned it. You practiced for months. You love music." "Not anymore," he said. That night, after Caleb went to bed, I sat in the kitchen staring at the case for hours. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I couldn't just erase what we'd been through. But I also couldn't ignore that he was hurting, not just because of the dent, but because of what it symbolized. That was when I realized I couldn't fix this the way I'd fixed everything else, by shrugging it off, by pretending it didn't matter. That's what I'd always done with my family. Every time Mark mocked me, every time my parents brushed me aside, every time they chose him over me, I swallowed it down. And all that ever did was teach them they could keep doing it. But this was different. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my son. For the next week, I kept quiet. I didn't respond to Mark's texts, even when he sent more of them. Pictures of the twins swinging their plastic bats with captions like, "Ready for round 2." He thought he was getting to me. And maybe he was, but not in the way he expected. I started making calls. At first, I was just trying to get the guitar repaired. I contacted the shop where I'd bought it, asked about the cost to refinish the wood and fix the dent. They told me it could be done, but it wouldn't be cheap. I almost scheduled it right then, but something stopped me. What was the point of repairing it if Caleb never touched it again? That's when the planning started. Quiet, careful, step by step. I didn't tell him at first. He needed time. I didn't want him to feel like I was pushing him to move on. Instead, I started gathering information. I asked a lawyer friend if posting videos of a child without consent could be taken down. I began saving screenshots of the comments under Mark's video. I documented everything. At night, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, digging through old memories. Not just recent ones, but years back. Times my parents had undermined me. Times Mark had stolen things from me. Times they'd made me feel small in front of Caleb. I wrote it all down, one by one, until I had pages of incidents staring back at me. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about clarity. About finally seeing my family for who they were instead of who I kept wishing they could be. And as that list grew, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped hoping they'd call. And I stopped feeling guilty for wanting to protect my boy. By the end of the second week, I knew what I had to do. I didn't tell Caleb. Not yet. But I started planning for the next family gathering, Mark's birthday party. Everyone would be there. If they wanted a show, fine. I'd give them one they wouldn't forget. Because they'd taken something from my son. Not just a guitar, but his sense of safety, his joy, and I wasn't going to let that stand. But before I could act, something happened that pushed me right over the edge. A new video popped up on Mark's page. This time, it wasn't just the bat hitting the guitar. It was edited together with clips of Caleb tuning it, playing it in the living room that first night. Even clips from months back, when we were visiting and he was quietly practicing in a corner. And over it all, Mark's voice, mocking, laughing, calling him rock star in training, and somebody get this kid a record deal. He'd been recording my son for months without me knowing. That was the final straw. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt ready. And as I closed my laptop that night, the plan crystallized in my mind. One that would make sure my family finally understood they had crossed a line. The morning after I saw that second video, something inside me shifted completely. It felt like I'd been stumbling around in a dark room for years, and someone had finally turned on the lights. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was certain. I was focused now. That cold, heavy feeling in my chest had hardened into determination. I started with Caleb. Over breakfast at the kitchen table, I told him straight. "I'm getting that video taken down." His head snapped up. "You can do that." "Maybe not instantly," I said. "But I promise you, we're not letting them turn you into a joke." He hesitated and then asked in a small voice, "Will we have to see them again?" That was the first time I said it out loud. "Not unless we want to." And something in those words seemed to loosen the weight pressing down on him. He still didn't touch the guitar that day, but for the first time since that nightmare weekend, he sat with me on the couch and watched a video of one of his favorite guitarists. Baby steps, I thought. Meanwhile, I started laying down the pieces of a plan. I called my buddy Lyle, who works in IT security and has zero patience for bullies. When I told him what Mark had done, posting videos of Caleb without my consent, he didn't even pause. "Send me the links," he said. 2 days later, the videos were gone, just like that. Removed for privacy violations. That night, Mark blew up my phone. "What did you do?" was the first message. Then, "Do you know how many views that video had?" Then 30 seconds later, "You're pathetic. Can't take a joke." I didn't respond. I just screenshotted everything and dropped it into the growing folder I'd started. Step 1. Get control of the narrative. Step 2 was about Caleb. I took the guitar to the music store for a repair estimate, and while I was there I talked to the owner, Paul, a guy who's been in the business forever. When I explained what had happened, he shook his head. "That's rough," he said, "but kids bounce back. You just have to give them the right push." Then he showed me a little soundproof practice room in the back and told me they had private instructors who worked one-on-one. "Sometimes it helps when the encouragement comes from someone other than Dad," he added with a wink. I signed Caleb up for weekly lessons before I left the store. When I told him that night, his eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Private lessons? For real?" "For real," I said. "And I'll be right there the first time, in case you want backup." That Saturday we went. He was nervous, glancing around like people might be laughing at him, but his instructor, a college kid also named Caleb, was patient and kind. By the end of the hour, my boy was smiling again. On the way home, he said, "Maybe we don't have to sell the guitar yet." The relief that washed over me was so strong, I almost had to pull the car over. While Caleb started slowly getting his confidence back, I focused on step 3, getting my own life in order. I'd worked at the repair shop for years, steady but never aiming higher. Now I found myself staying late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I cleaned up the floor, organized the inventory, even tossed ideas to the owner about pulling in more business. He noticed. A few weeks later, he called me into his office. "You've been stepping up," he said. "I like it. How do you feel about taking on a management role?" I nearly fell off my chair. "Me? You," he said with a grin. "It's more money and more responsibility, but I think you're ready." I accepted immediately. The pay bump meant Caleb's lessons weren't a strain anymore, and I started tucking a little away every check into a fund, not just for repairs or emergencies, but for something bigger, something solid that no one could take from us. I also started working on myself physically. Not some dramatic New Year's resolution thing, just steady, quiet progress. A little stronger every week. A little more grounded every time I looked in the mirror. I even bought a cheap weight bench for the garage and made it part of my routine. I started running after work and cut back on takeout. And sometimes Caleb rode his bike beside me in the evenings while we talked about music, school, life, little conversations that felt like we were building something new just for the two of us. And the more I focused on that, the less I let Mark and my parents bother me. At least, that's what I told myself. But I won't lie. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Mark or some family group chat popped up with a picture of the twins, that cold anger would stir again. Then came the invite. Mark's birthday barbecue. Mom dropped it in the group chat. Sunday at 3. Everyone's coming. Bring Caleb. The twins miss him. And I almost ignored it until I saw Mark's reply under it. "Better tell Jackson to leave the baby guitar at home this time," with a face with tears of joy emoji. I stared at that line for a long time and then typed one reply. "We'll be there." Caleb looked surprised when I told him. "Do we have to?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. Trust me. By then I wasn't just surviving. I had a plan that would make sure Mark, my parents, my sister, and everyone else finally understood the days of laughing at us were over. When Sunday arrived, I was ready in a way I hadn't been before, because this time I wasn't walking into their backyard as the guy they could push around. I had leverage, and I knew how to use it. But first I wanted them to show their true colors one last time, so no one could pretend they didn't deserve what was coming. Stepping into Mark's backyard felt like walking onto a stage. The smell of barbecue, Kids running barefoot in the grass, adults clustered near the patio with drinks, waiting for the entertainment. And I could tell right away we were the entertainment. Mark spotted us first, flaring his arms like a game show host. Well, look who decided to show up. And I just smiled and nodded. Caleb stayed close, not scared exactly. He'd been gaining confidence in lessons, but cautious. I told him before we left that he didn't have to play if he didn't want to, just watch, that this was for us. And as the afternoon went on, I watched them all. The smirks, the jokes, the little signals between Mark and my parents, the twins pretending to swing invisible bats while Mark filmed and laughed like it was the best thing in the world. Careful, I said casually the third time they did it. You don't want to break anything important? And Mark laughed and shot back. Relax, Jackson. We're not touching anything you care about today, which only made my plan firm up in my head. I wasn't looking for petty revenge. I wanted them to understand what they'd done and why it couldn't happen again. And then the first piece of useful information fell into my lap almost by accident while I stood near the grill getting a soda and overheard Mark talking to Dad about a new gig. So I finally got the promotion, he was saying, pride dripping off his words. New supervisor position starts Monday. I'll be running the whole department. And Dad clapped him on the back like he'd won the lottery. I froze because that promotion tied Mark to a company whose owner I actually knew, a regular at the repair shop. And suddenly a path forward opened up in my head. He brought his classic cars in twice a year for tune-ups, and for the last 3 years I'd been the one working on them. So we talked a lot, and he knew me by name. And when I realized the owner of that company was a regular customer, my head started spinning. Not because I wanted Mark to lose his job, not exactly, but because suddenly I had a direct line to someone who now had a say in Mark's professional future. And that was interesting, very interesting, so I didn't call it out in the moment. I just tucked the thought away like a weight in my pocket. Later, while everyone was eating, Mom tried to needle me. So, Corey, she said, did you ever fix that fancy guitar, or are you still crying about it? The table chuckled, and I set my fork down slowly. It's getting repaired, I said evenly, and Caleb's been taking lessons. He's getting really good. Lessons? Mark snorted. Private ones? What? How much is that costing you? Don't worry about it, I replied with a small smile. That was another thing that had shifted since I took the management role. I wasn't scraping by anymore. I was comfortable. I'd cleared the last of my credit card debt, set up a savings account for Caleb, even started putting money toward a down payment on a bigger place for us. And I saw a flicker cross Mark's face when I mentioned it. A quick flash of irritation, maybe envy, which he hid behind a laugh. Good for you, man, he said, but I didn't bite. I was there to gather ammo, not trade insults. The second big break came when my sister, who'd been scrolling her phone all afternoon, leaned over and hissed. You know they still have the video, right? I turned. What video? She smirked. The original. Dad saved it before it got taken down. He says he's going to show it at Christmas. Says it'll be a tradition. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Interesting, I thought. That night after the barbecue, I went home and wrote everything down. Mark's promotion, Dad saving the clip, Mom's comments. Because it was becoming painfully clear they didn't see the moment as a mistake. They saw it as an ongoing joke they could pull out for years, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Over the next 2 weeks, I built momentum. I doubled down at work, impressing the owner enough that he offered me a chance to shadow him on the business side. Bookkeeping, supply, customer management, saying he was thinking of retiring in a few years and needed someone who could take over. When that sank in, I realized I was on track to own the shop someday, and that thought lit a fire under me. So I pushed even harder and used the extra pay to surprise Caleb one Friday with a brand new hardshell case to replace the dented one. He ran his fingers over the plush lining and whispered, "This is way nicer than the old one." And I told him he deserved it, and that when his guitar came back from repair, he'd keep it locked up and no one would touch it unless he said so. And he smiled. That wide, real smile, for the first time since the incident, and asked, "Can I play at the winter recital?" And I said absolutely. While Caleb slowly reclaimed his confidence, I kept stacking wins. I signed him up for extra lessons, started stashing money every paycheck into a future fund, not just for repairs, but for something bigger, and even began getting into shape. A little stronger each week, more grounded when I looked in the mirror. Then Mark texted about another family dinner at Mom's next weekend. Don't be late. and I knew what I had to do, so I spent days preparing. I spoke to my lawyer friend about legal boundaries, what counted as harassment or defamation, what options I'd have if the video was shown again, and had him draft a formal but measured letter just in case. Everything I did was deliberate, building a safety net and leverage so that when the next gathering rolled around, I wouldn't be blindsided. And I wasn't just acting on anger anymore. I was reclaiming what they'd tried to take from us. Just enough to make it clear any future attempts to spread or show that video would have real consequences. And by the time Saturday rolled around, I wasn't nervous. I was ready, because this dinner wasn't going to be another chance for them to laugh at us. It was going to be the moment the balance of power shifted permanently. And when Caleb and I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, I could feel it humming under my skin. But it wasn't the shaky, tight-chested fear from the barbecue. Weeks ago, this was different. I was calm, collected, almost eerily so, my plan refined by days of mental rehearsals, and now ready to be put into action. Inside the house, the smell of roast beef and garlic mashed potatoes hit me. Mom's special family dinner menu, the kind she used to make before she let Mark run every gathering. And everyone was already there. Mark and his wife. The twins sprawled on the living room floor with toy cars, my sister glued to her phone, and my parents seated like royalty at the table. About time, Mark said with a grin. We were starting to think you chickened out. Not a chance, I said, setting Caleb's backpack by the wall without raising my voice. No scene, just a small smile. Dinner started off deceptively normal. Whether small talk, my sister grumbling about gas prices, and Mark yammering on about his first weeks as a supervisor. I nodded in the right spots and even asked him questions about the job to puff his ego up, exactly as planned, letting him get comfortable in the role of the big brother who'd finally made it, while I sat there baiting him. Waiting. Then right before dessert, Dad reached for his phone, that telltale move, and I knew what he was about to do. Dad? I said lightly before he could pull it up. Before you show that, I have something I want to share. Every head turned to me, and Mark smirked. Oh boy, here we go. I stood calm and pulled a folder from Caleb's backpack. Neatly printed screenshots of Mark's texts, copies of the online comments, and the legal letter my lawyer friend had drafted, and I laid it on the table. I've been doing a little research, I said, sliding the packet forward. Posting videos of someone's kid without consent and refusing to take them down when asked can get you in serious trouble, not just with the platform, but legally. Mom frowned. Corey, don't start. I didn't start, I finished. Here's what's going to happen. You will delete every copy of that video you have, right now, and you will agree in writing never to show or share it again. Mark barked a laugh. Or what? You gonna sue us? If I have to, I said, pushing the letter toward him. This is a formal notice. The next step is a cease and desist, then legal action. I have every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence. The room went quiet. Mark's grin faltered for the first time since this started, and Dad broke the silence. Corey, don't be ridiculous. This is family. You wouldn't drag us to court over a joke. It stopped being a joke the moment my son stopped playing music at home because he was scared you'd laugh, I said, my voice sharpening for the first time that night. You humiliated him. You humiliated me. And you enjoyed it. That ends today. Caleb looked up, eyes wide, but I caught a tiny smile tug at his mouth. Small, real, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right side of this fight. Derek leaned back in his chair, trying to smirk his way through it. You're bluffing. I let a faint smile cross my face. Am I? Then I pulled out my phone, opened up my messages, and scrolled to a conversation with the owner of the company Derek had just been bragging about. A friendly back and forth, ending with his words. Asterisk, if you ever need anything, Jackson, don't hesitate to reach out. Asterisk, I angled the screen so Derek could see. Your boss is a regular at my shop. Nice guy. Loves to talk about his employees. I wonder what he'd think about a supervisor spending his weekends mocking his own nephew online. That was the breaking point. Derek's face flushed red, and for once, he didn't have a smart remark ready. You wouldn't, he muttered. I don't want to, I said evenly. But I will if I have to. So make the right choice. Surprisingly, my sister was the one who cut in. Just delete the video. Derek, she said with a roll of her eyes. This isn't worth it. My mom looked torn, glancing between us, but finally she sighed. Fine. Get rid of it. All of it. Derek sat there another beat, then yanked his phone out and started tapping. After a moment, he held it up. Happy now? Not yet, I said. Show me the trash folder. And the backups. He glared but did it. One by one, he deleted every last copy until I was satisfied. Only then did I tuck the folder back into Caleb's backpack. Good, I said simply. Now we can eat dessert. The table stayed quiet for the rest of the meal. Derek sulked, my dad muttered about taking things too far, and my mom kept giving me looks, but not one of them mentioned the video again. Later, when we got to the car, Caleb slid into the passenger seat and let out a long breath. You were awesome, he whispered. I smiled at him. I told you. No one laughs at you like that ever again. He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he asked, Can we practice when we get home? Absolutely, I said. Driving away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Derek standing stiff on the porch, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He wasn't laughing anymore. And I knew this was only the beginning, because I still had more cards to play. They thought the night was about a video, but it was about so much more. It was about showing them I wasn't the little brother they could humiliate anymore, and that I was just getting started. On the drive home, the quiet between us wasn't tense. It was the kind of stillness that comes after a storm passes. Caleb tapped his fingers against his leg, keeping rhythm with a tune I recognized, one he used to practice before everything went wrong. When we got back, he opened the guitar case without me even asking. He only played a few simple chords, but it was enough to make my chest ache with relief. The spark was back, but I knew this wasn't finished. Forcing Derek to delete the videos wasn't the same as true accountability. My family had spent months turning my son into their punchline, and if I stopped here, they'd twist it back around, paint me as overdramatic, tell Caleb he overreacted. So the next morning, I sent out a group text to everyone who'd been at dinner. Asterisk, I think it's time we take a break from family gatherings. Caleb and I won't be coming to birthdays or holidays for the foreseeable future. We need distance. Asterisk, the replies came fast. Mom, asterisk Jackson, don't be ridiculous. Families fight. You don't just run away. Asterisk me. Asterisk, this isn't a fight. This is a boundary, and it's non-negotiable. Asterisk Mark. Asterisk, oh, give me a break. You think you won because you made me delete a dumb video? Asterisk me. Asterisk no, Mark. I think I won because last night was the first time you didn't get the last laugh. Asterisk after that, I muted the chat. I wasn't going to let their words poison Caleb's healing any more than they already had. For the next month, I poured everything into rebuilding our world, and Caleb practiced more and more, sometimes even leaving his bedroom door open so I could hear the music drifting through the house. His teacher told me he was progressing faster than most kids his age, and then came the recital. Caleb was nervous, but he played beautifully, and when the audience clapped, I saw something flash across his face I hadn't seen in a long time. Pride, real and unshaken, not the forced smile he used to give when my parents clapped sarcastically, but a wide, genuine grin that made him look like a different kid. Afterward, we went out for ice cream, just the two of us. Think Grandma and Grandpa would have liked it? He asked carefully. Probably, I said honestly. But you don't need them to clap to know you did great. He smiled at that, satisfied. Meanwhile, the silence from the rest of the family stretched longer. My mom tried guilt-tripping me a few times with pictures of the twins at soccer games and messages like, they missed their cousin, but I didn't respond. Then one day, out of nowhere, Mark called. You talked to my boss, didn't you? He snapped the second I answered. Nope, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. Don't lie to me, Jackson. He called me into his office this morning. Said he'd been made aware of some questionable behavior outside of work. Asked if it was true. Do you know how embarrassing that was? I let the smallest smile creep into my voice. Maybe he saw the video before it got taken down. Internet has a long memory. You ruined my reputation, Mark hissed. No, I said evenly. You did that yourself. I just stopped letting you hide it. There was a long pause before he muttered. You're a real piece of work. Maybe, I said, but at least I can look my kid in the eye and know I protected him. And I hung up. After that, the call stopped, the text slowed, even my parents pulled back. I think Mark realized that pushing me further might actually cost him his shiny new job, and my parents, for all their denial, weren't willing to risk more public drama. Months passed. Caleb got better and better, started writing his own little riffs, playing them for me in the living room after dinner, and the music that had once been silenced filled the house again. Each chord another brick in the wall I was building between us and the toxicity we'd left behind. One afternoon, I came home from work and found him in the garage, guitar in hand, playing for the neighbor kids. He looked up at me, grinning. "They asked me to teach them something," he said. I just stood there, taking it in, the confidence in his voice, the way his hands moved without hesitation, the laughter of the kids around him. And I realized this was the real revenge. Not the legal letter, not the showdown at dinner, not even the quiet panic I'd planted in Mark when he thought his career was on the line. The real revenge was that Caleb had taken back his joy, that he was thriving again, playing music, turning something cruel into something beautiful. That night, as I closed up the garage, my phone buzzed. A single text from Mark. Asterisk, guess you got what you wanted. Asterisk, I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. Asterisk, no. I got what Caleb deserved. Asterisk, then I blocked his number. I went back inside, sat on the couch, and listened to my boy play. The house felt lighter than it had in months, and as the last note rang out, I thought about all the times my family had laughed at us, all the times they thought they held the power. And I smiled, not the bitter smile I'd worn in the weeks after the incident, but a calm, steady one. Because they'd finally learned the truth the hard way. When you spend years making someone the punchline, you shouldn't be surprised when one day they decide to write the ending themselves and make it a masterpiece.